This right here is my new to me Ducati Hyperstrada. It's from 2013. It has a little over 13,000 miles on it, and I bought it for $7,200. I traded in my smc-r for this thing, a 2020 with a little over 6,000 miles on it and a whole bunch more features, and AF1 has since turned around and sold that motorcycle for around 11,000 bucks. This bike here has fewer features, more miles, and is in almost every way other than power a downgrade. But I am having way more fun on this motorcycle, which leaves me to wonder why. Have you ever thought that maybe it's because motorcycle technology is getting a little too silly?
You know, one thing that always kind of annoyed me about the modern motorcycling discourse online, it's this need to always get a new, bigger and better motorcycle. I get where they're coming from. I mean, it's that same modern mentality that if you're going to replace something, you might as well replace it with a bigger and better version of the thing that you already have, right? Because I mean, it works. Might as well be better. You see this all the time with iPhones. I mean, how many models are there, and how many times have those iPhones tended to sell themselves based on their new and better camera?
I mean, this thing's got 6 flipping cameras on it, and I guarantee you the Galaxy 23 is gonna have 7. But does that kind of tech creep always make sense when it comes to motorcycles? I don't think so, but allow me to cite my sources. Now, here in the States, it's not that uncommon to assume that somebody's coming to motorcycles from the car world. Either you're looking for a cheaper way to go faster, or you're just curious as to how the other side lives. By the way, if you are one of those bike curious folks out there, just take the plunge. Motorcycles are freaking awesome. But in case you hadn't guessed, motorcycles and cars are super different.
Oh geez, Spike, that's a real hot take right there. Motorcycles and cars are different? I never would have guessed. Okay, all right. Maybe that's not the most nuanced take ever, but I mean, think about it beyond just the obvious stuff. I know we're out here in the elements and we don't have cup holders and seat warmers, unless you're on a Goldwing, that is. But think about it in terms of just lifespan. Cars last for years and years and see hundreds of thousands of miles.
Hence me wheeling my Speed 3 up here onto the roof. This is a 2013 Mazda Speed 3, and I've had it since 2013. This thing's got 85,000 miles on it, and it is bone stock. This has dual zone climate control, cruise control, and that's about it. It's got a Bluetooth system in there, but doesn't really work all that great by today's standards. But here's the thing, I've had this car for 10 years. If I were going to upgrade, it's inevitable that the technology that's on here would be better. Not because I'm looking for that technology, but because in the intervening 10 years, there's been a ton of time for that to trickle down from the fanciest cars on the market to the entry level. Bikes, on the other hand, well, for a whole bunch of reasons, we've been waiting for technology to trickle its way down to cheaper motorcycles. Yeah, we've started to see things like TFT dashes show up on beginner bikes, but I had a question for you. What good is a fancy TFT display other than for reading your speed if you don't have a whole bunch of other buttons to push and modes to switch? Seems to me like on a normal beginner bike, you'd be just as well served by a single round clock right in the middle of the dashboard. In fact, it might be easier to read in direct sunlight. We are seeing stuff like adjustable power modes, levels of traction control, and all of that make its way down from leader bikes, but you don't really need it.
Now, I'm not trying to be mean here or insinuate that you don't ride hard, but think about the kind of riding that you typically do when you're out on the road. If you're anything like me, you're probably 95% a street rider. And yeah, I do have an ADV bike in the stable, but this is Texas, where all those fancy open plains people used to opine for and fill up all the songs, yeah, those are owned by people who patrol their fence lines with shotguns, so you're not going to get an opportunity to ride off-road very much here. Same goes for the track. I've been there a couple of times, but it's hard to bring an entire day's worth of track gear on your motorcycle, as well as a chair to sit in, some water to drink. It's just not feasible. Not to mention the price of entry to a lot of racetracks can be prohibitively expensive. that basically just leaves the street, and you can have a ton of fun out here. But you're not going to be out here pushing your limits, which means that technology, it's going to waste.
Where does most of our technology on motorcycles actually come from? Racing. Every year, manufacturers try to eke out a few tenths of a second over their competition, and that means they need every single advantage, including riders with the cojones to push the bike to the limit of traction. On 300 horsepower race bikes, it makes sense to have a bazillion levels of traction control to account for tire wear, changing weights of the bike as it runs out of gas, as well as ride height devices to keep the front wheel on the ground and help put power down. Now, does any of that sound like your average Saturday ride? If you're a normal person, probably not. So why are you going to spend a bunch of money on technology you're never going to be able to use properly? Let's take the Ducati, for example. Yes, it has wheelie control, but it's a simple on-off affair, a question of, do you want wheelies or do you not? It's also got traction control baked into the 3 different rider modes, but you don't have to go in and adjust a whole bunch of different levels. It's just right there in each mode. Unfortunately, it is stuck behind the most irritating mode switch ever put on a motorcycle on the face of the planet, but that's besides the point. Beyond that, we've got ABS. That's it. No fancy cruise control, no up and down quick shifter, no TFT display, and you know what? I think it's right in the sweet spot.
Nothing on this bike goes to waste. Urban Mode is really good at taming the 66 foot-pounds of torque that this 821cc engine provides with just enough traction control to help you avoid all those oil slicks and splattered e-scooter riders that you're going to encounter in the city. Out on the highway, though, you've got Touring Mode, which is going to give you plenty of power to pass just about anything in the blink of an eye, and it tames your traction control a little bit because it's not all that unpredictable out on the highway. And then finally, you've got yourself Sport Mode, which is going to give you all 110 fire-breathing horsepower with just enough traction control to keep you from sliding out on your street if you're getting a little too zesty. Not to mention, all of this is on a motorcycle that's as old as my car. Do I wish that this thing had electronic cruise control? Sure.
But I don't need some fancy electronic cruise control system when I can get something like this Atlas throttle lock right here for any motorcycle. I've been riding with one of these on my KLR for over a year now, and I absolutely love the thing. And while this thing is awesome, is there anything that this $150 gizmo can do that an $8 Amazon one can't? Nope, not really. I am hearing one counterpoint though, and that's that quick shifters and auto blippers, they're so much faster. But what's the point on the street? You worried about your lap times going down your favorite twisty road? I'm not one of those purists out there saying that only real riders know how to clutchless shift and rev match their bikes by hand. First of all, it's not that hard. And secondly, I rode for a solid few years before bothering to learn how to do either of those things, and I did just fine. But I am saying it's probably not worth the effort for the average person to chase down technology to put on their bikes to make themselves faster. I've seen a bunch of folks install aftermarket quick shifters, and heck, I've even done it myself on my old VFR. I thought it was so neat when I slapped one on, but did it actually do anything for me? Well, here's a clip of me launching my VFR in a pretty lazy fashion just to see what it would do. Now here's me doing the exact same thing but with clutchless shifting instead on the Ducati. The biggest difference here is weight and a little bit of experience for me. That's what's going to make the difference out on the road. The reality is that most of us mere mortals are incapable of using cutting-edge motorcycle technology the way it was meant to win races. It's all fine and dandy to flex on your pals with your fancy TFT dash and all the cool buttons and gizmos, but it's not going to make you a better rider. I say this next part as a 100% certified card-carrying average Joe. All of this technology stuff, it just feels like a gimmick to me, something to justify charging more and more for the same bikes year over year because they've improved the technology ever so slightly. I do shout this stuff out in my reviews because it's there, and I would be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't talk about it. But do I need it? No, doesn't make a difference to me. I find myself wanting to spend more time riding than fiddling with a bunch of buttons on my motorcycle. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Tenere 700 was such a breath of fresh air. It was one of the only motorcycles in the adventure space that was brave enough to come out without a giant tablet for a dashboard. It's one less thing to break on that motorcycle, and it's one of those things that makes it more enjoyable to the average rider.
Now, I did want to take a second here before wrapping this video up and touch on one of the other big reasons people want to upgrade their motorcycle, and that's power. It makes all the sense in the world. You start out on your little 300 or 400cc motorcycle, and then you move up this very well-defined path that manufacturers have designed. Once you're done with your beginner bike, you move up to the 650, and then once you're done with that, you get your 900-ish motorcycle that's got around 100 horsepower, and that's your first real big taste of how fast bikes can be. And then at the very tippy top, the bleeding edge, you've got yourself the super fast leader bike. It's the thing that a lot of people tend to aspire towards. But here's one of the ugly realities of those motorcycles is you just can't use that much power on the street. I still highly recommend that you take some time and go ride one, because it is absolutely world-changing. Nothing on the planet will feel as fast to you as a leader bike ever will. But if you're anything like me, you're gonna realize how pointless that much power can be. I've ridden a ton of really fast motorcycles, an R1, I've ridden hyper nakeds like the ZH2, I've ridden the turbocharged Hayabusa, and honestly, I've had more fun on motorcycles making around 120 horsepower or less than I ever had on any of those super fancy leader bikes. In fact, I know plenty of people who have owned leader bikes or bikes that are making north of 180, 200 plus horsepower, and they've gotten rid of them for bikes that make less because it gives them more to play with when they're out riding around and having some fun with their buddies.
But this has all been the opinion of one guy in a street alone with a motorcycle shouting at a camera. What do you guys think about technology on motorcycles? Do you like having all of the buttons, or do you think it's getting a little out of control? Are you enjoying having that biblical amount of power on your bike? Or are you getting the job done with a little Rebel 250? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit that notification bell and make sure that you've got all the notifications for the channel turned on. That's the simplest thing you can do to help the channel keep growing. And until the next time, guys, I'll catch you later.